that means get closer to the mic. So I applied to graduate schools, 7 graduate schools all across the nation, and I was rejected by all 7 of them. Gulp. And that meant that I would either have to give up on this or find a new way to teach myself, figure out my own way, which turned out to lead me towards craft and craftsmanship. I thought the way I would educate myself was to apprentice, to go to old ways and to look at old traditions. And with a one-way ticket to Bali and $300, I began to live and apprentice with a batik artist. And this is my first canvas, which is made by dipping it into colored dyes and using wax as a resist. And an artist named Robert Rauschenberg wanted to do exhibitions in Asia, and they needed someone to coordinate that. And because I lived there and I knew some folks at USF, they asked if I could help coordinate Rauschenberg's overseas exhibits in Southeast Asia. And so Bob came over, and I was his guide because I spoke the local language. And he said, I hear you're an artist, can I see your work? And I just showed him this photo, a little slide. It was that long ago when we had slides. And he said, gee, can I curate an exhibition? It would be the first solo exhibition of my work in the United States. And I said, sure. I hadn't studied his work, and that's the only reason I wasn't really nervous around him. So I could really just be myself. Anyway, here's Bob at the opening of my show, and he put on his batik jacket about our shared love and appreciation for textile traditions. All right, fast forward 10 years, I applied for a Fulbright to study textile traditions in India and to teach painting, contemporary painting. And so I show up, the embassy was expecting me to give 3 big exhibitions. They paid museums in 3 major cities to rent their gallery spaces. And this was a big break for me as a young artist. And I was excited, and I shipped all of my very special paints, and I made all of my own brushes in order to make these very big gestures. And so I shipped my special brushes, and I'm in India teaching and waiting for my materials. And they didn't arrive. They got lost. And so it was like, what am I gonna do? I can't get these materials here. It's 10 weeks till the show. I can complain about what's not here, but gee, that is not very interesting, is it? I looked around me, and I was in a place famous for sculpture, for stone temples, for cast bronzes, the Chola bronzes. This is South India. So I decide I'm going to learn and apprentice in sculpture for the first time. And I learned how to make lost wax bronzes. But now it's only 8 weeks till the show, and I've got a dozen small bronzes, and they had rented these big exhibition spaces, and I really wanted the gestures to expand. And every day I'd finish work in the workshop, and I'd go for exercise. I'd walk, it was just a block from the beach, a little village, and I'd take a long walk and a swim. And it was the end of the workday for the fishermen as well. And so every day I was watching them reeling their nets into mounds on the sand. And this time I'm walking down the beach, and I'm thinking, okay, I've got to scale these bronzes up. I've got, how many kilograms of bronze am I going to need? How much is that going to cost? Oh no, I can't do this. What am I going to do? And then I looked at them again. I watched them every day, but suddenly I saw, like, that's a way of making volumetric form without heavy solid material. And so I began to apprentice with them. They taught me how to make knots. This is my first sculpture. It's a self-portrait titled Wide Hips. You can see. And I pulled it up with their help into the air to take a photo, and I discovered that it began to move with a choreography created in a way that never repeated itself. It was nature, it was wind, and I was completely mesmerized. And then I was invited to do a piece for the largest art fair in Europe, and so I went back to India to work with the fishermen again. And this is a piece, 1.5 million hand-tied knots, I stuffed into my duffel bag, and then managed to get it on the plane to Madrid, Spain, where we laced it into the railing of this round courtyard. And it was just there for a long weekend, but more than 100,000 people went through. And one of them was the urbanist and architect redesigning Portugal's waterfront. And he sent me an email. I thought it was actually like a prank from my friends, but then a second email came, and he said, can you imagine this as a permanent work for the city? Can you build that? Well, I went to see, this is my first site visit video, and this is what I imagined, but I really didn't know how to build it. And by the way, and so I went searching for a fiber that had to withstand the sun's ultraviolet light, pollution, and salt air, but yet remain soft and fluidly moving. I bought a ticket to Las Vegas to the Industrial Fabrics Trade Fair, and I walked the halls, one after the other, shaking hands, telling them what I needed, and I found, of course at the very end, couldn't it have been at the beginning? No, the very end, I found this fiber, which is called polytetrafluoroethylene, PTFE. It's also what your skillets are coated with. It's also known as Teflon. And it's what astronaut spacesuits are coated with because it doesn't lose strength with exposure to heat or the sun's rays. So then the client, or the country of Portugal, said, can you prove to us it can withstand 90 miles per hour of wind for the typhoons? And I didn't know how to, but I went searching. And an engineer for sails for America's Cup racing yachts, Peter Heppel, helped me really solve the challenge of precise shape with gentle movement through mathematics. I didn't understand the math. Lacey said, I don't know how she does it. Well, I do it by collaboration, not by mathematics or computational skill myself. But collaboration is what feeds me. I love working together. Some artists want to work alone, but it's a social art in a way, both the way I create it and the way it goes out into the world. Okay, next challenge. I had to find a way to fabricate it in a way where the knots would be stronger than my hand-tied knots. So I went from factory to factory in the United States, and there aren't that many left. And they just said, no, no, no. They didn't have time to mess around with an artist. But one said yes, and I'm still working with them today, more than 20 years later. Together, we figured out how to document these. We needed to create a new language to describe an ancient craft that industrial workers could recreate. And then we needed a way to hold it up, in the middle of this roundabout, and that's a 40,000 pound steel ring. It took 3 years. And during that time, the birth of both of my children unfolded. And here I was turning the bolt on the last pin, and I just couldn't believe that something that had just been in my mind as imagination was now physical and real. This is video from that first site visit, and this is what you see when you drive the coast of Portugal today. It was installed in 2004, so it's been more than 20 years. And what's exciting for me is that it was a culmination of something I think I had always longed for. I wanted a sense of being sheltered, but also connected to limitless sky. To feel safe, but not claustrophobic. And This is my new favorite photo. I found it on Flickr. No, I didn't take it. What you can't see is that there is a 3-lane highway and there's no crosswalk. So all these people have darted through traffic in order to experience what it feels like to be underneath. And you get to just go upstairs. And then a friend reached out to me. She said, go to Google Earth, go to Europe at the level where there's only one image representing each country of Europe, and tell me what is the image now representing the country of Portugal. And I was shocked. I don't know how, what algorithm determines that. I don't know who took the photo, but it's very meaningful. And more recently, for this show, which is the premiere of my cyanotypes, I've gone back to my early photographs and my digital models to create these cyanotypes, which is also my first edition. And if anybody is interested in those for their personal collection, come talk to me later. Or Lacey will put you in touch with me. But this is the first time by sensitizing paper with a light emulsion. It's really one of the oldest photography methods, cyanotype, and then exposing with ultraviolet light, the sun's rays from the sky. And you'll see these upstairs. We'll be there together. Taking you quickly through a bunch of projects to see. So this is what the Vancouver Olympics was going to build. And this is what I convinced them to build. And I was visiting just 10 days ago in Vancouver, and it's been there 17 years and it's doing beautifully. And here is the cyanotype. San Francisco International Airport, they were seeking a zone of recomposure after security check. And here is every beating second. The hardest part was getting them to let me cut out those holes in the roof. And here's the cyanotype. Phoenix, they brought me in and they asked, they said, we're seeking a civic icon and for our downtown. This is the heart of downtown. I said, well, what's here? It's parking lots and a notorious strip club. That same place today. The title, Her Secret is Patience. And it's interacting with the weather. It's bringing your eyes up to the sky in a place that's flat. And then the sun is creating these shadow drawings. And remember the shadow drawings, because I'm going to show you something at the end that could maybe help with shade between this building and the bistro building. At night, the colored lights change over the course of an entire year. The color in the winter are warm temperature colors, and in the summer, it's cool temperature colors. There's the cyanotype. Now this is upstairs. These are the early maquettes for a project that started with a phone call from the Biennial of the Americas. They asked if an artist could represent the interconnectedness of nations. And I really didn't know how to do it, but I said yes, and I went into research mode, which is what I always do. And I was on NOAA's website, and I saw this mapping. There had been a tragic earthquake in Chile, and I was looking at these ripple effects, and I thought, that's a metaphor of interconnectedness. Something happened somewhere else in the world, but none of us can avoid being impacted by it. And so I just wrote off to NOAA and asked for the data set, because anybody can get it. It's open to the public. And I converted it into this. Now, the forms I've shown you up to now are much simpler and more curved. This one, because of the data inspiration, had these extensions, and it turned out to build that in steel would just be almost impossible. It would get so heavy. It would just be ugly, but also really expensive. It just, up to here, all those pieces, I was using steel pipe that we took to the bender where they make roller coasters. But to do this, it would just be like way too heavy. And I wanted to find a fiber to solve this. I needed something really strong. And I found ultra high molecular weight polyethylene. It's upstairs. Lacey made sure that samples would be in a glass case so that people could see each of these up close. And this is what NASA uses in space to tether the Mars rover. And that fiber enabled me to make a piece for the first time that was completely soft and now so light. That's the Denver Art Museum, that it could lace through the windows without any additional support. And that meant it could travel in a fairly small crate around the world fairly easily and inexpensively. This is Sydney, Australia. This is, anyone recognize Amsterdam? This is the first time we had to deal with boat traffic. Singapore, Prague, Shanghai, Santiago, Chile. It was really going from continent to continent. Montreal, Canada. You can see it from day into night. Hong Kong, the Peninsula Hotel, launching their international art program. Munich, the Odeonsplatz, where Adolf Hitler staged the beer push. My German curator said, "We're creating a new history now." And that meant a lot. There's the book, Radical Softness, which is in the gift shop upstairs and on my website if you want a signed copy. We invited 30 authors from around the world and limited them each to 500 words. So it had to be short. So if you could, if you can't say it in 500 words, well, but this piece, there's an essay about what that meant, and you can see the historic images of that space as well. It became a growing series called the Earth Time series. This is a permanent iteration in South Korea from day to night. Last summer in the Netherlands, they asked if they could bring this into a big music festival. And I'm gonna go this year. I wasn't able to go. I'm like, I'm not missing it this time. You can join me in August. And here is the cyanotype. And then this is the next iteration in the Earth Time series, coming from another data set as inspiration. This is the mapping of the tsunami that hit Japan and the Fukushima nuclear plant. And for me, this is about being humble in the face of nature, because I know the engineer who designed the seawall to protect from tsunamis looked at the entire human recorded history and built that seawall higher than anything had ever been written down. It's just that nature is so much bigger than what we humans have in recorded history. And so we started to develop these computer tools in my studio, and this enabled us to design a piece. And this is out in London, where we convinced the mayor to shut down the busiest intersection in the whole city. That's Oxford Street and Regent Street, where Oxford Circus, the tube station, is. And it surprised all of us. Guess what happened? People started lying on the cold asphalt. It was January. And in fact, so many people came that they made the tube station exit only to prevent trampling. And in real time, people could pick a color and put their thumbprint in. We would convert that, this is my team up on the roof, into computer mapping onto the piece. And so this is democracy made visible, because people are voting like turquoise. Oh, now more people have said magenta. And then, so it's just unfolding above your eyes. The Earth Time series continued to evolve. This is an invitation from Madrid. They were celebrating the 400th anniversary of the Central Plaza, the Plaza Mayor. And I was so honored as a non-Spaniard to be invited to create the art commission for it. This is about their history, all the things that have happened in the square. But the piece began to have its own life again, and it began to travel. This is Vienna, the museum quarter. This is Dubai. That is the world's tallest building. And I'm so lucky, my engineer is the lead engineer of that building. He only does my projects because it's fun. And they say, in fact, he's one of those essays in the book that they also learn from these, which is, I guess, you know, if you could build skyscrapers around the world, why else would you work with an artist doing these crazy projects that I do? Helsinki, this is Senate Square. This is Sweden. And then I got an invitation from the Smithsonian in Washington, D.C., the American Art Museum. Their largest gallery is the Grand Salon in the historic Renwick Gallery across from the White House. And they were going to do a renovation. And when they reopened, they commissioned me to do a new piece. And they said, there are just a few constraints. It's historic, first of all, but it has to have a carpet because the acoustics, it's the only place the Smithsonian String Quartet play, and you can't change the acoustics. So you have to have a carpet. And I said, well, I can't do contemporary art with that carpet. So our compromise was I would have to learn to design and build my own carpet. Then they said, by the way, this is our big income generator. We rent this space at night for weddings and the correspondence dinner parties and all sorts of things. And so you have to leave it empty from 0 to 14 feet. But it has to be a fully satisfying art exhibition every day of the year, 365. And so this is what I designed. I created a sculpture that pulled up into that vaulted ceiling, and I decided to engage the space and the walls by projecting colored shadows. And you can see the carpet is the first time people started lying down in the Smithsonian. This is my process. This is the digital model that enabled me to create that work. And here's the cyanotype, which you can see upstairs. There it is, the translation into ancient craft. And here you can see people just, you know, getting all cozy and comfy there. And here are the projected shadows. Now the shadows change very slowly over a half an hour, sort of at the speed of sunlight. And then when the museum closes at 5 p.m., whoop, look what happened. Here's my design for the carpet. It's a topographic map of the sculpture. And a lot of surprises happened. There was a pop-up wedding for the first time. And this first opened as a temporary exhibition 2015. And since then, they've acquired it for the permanent collection for the Smithsonian. But at this point, 2015, it's the first time people were sharing photos and on Instagram. And this one says, melting with art as we become part of the exhibition. So, like very intimate things. At that time, the First Lady of the United States brought a delegation of the Nordic countries to see American art. And then she put this up on the official social media of the White House. I was very excited. I was hoping this would lead the Washington Post to do a thoughtful essay about the meaning embedded in these artworks, but no. All they wanted to write about was a headline about how people were Instagramming it. This is a model you see upstairs, and it is part of the process I used to create a work for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. This is a form which is mapping the color of a day. Those are the colors of sky that I took with a camera every 5 minutes. And in my studio, the process starts with string and wire, and then it moves into the computer. And by now we had developed better software to enable this drape with gravity. And then we converted it into a built piece. But I wanted the lighting to be really exciting, but also to express their mission. So as the sun is rising every day for them to begin their work, I'm converting that sunrise color into pixels in real time, because sunrise changes every day, and then projecting it onto the surface of the sculpture. Visible from the Space Needle and the craftsmanship, those white lines are that really strong fiber I told you they use in space. And every time you see the white lines come together, that's a hand splice, and you'll see some of those upstairs. And there is the cyanotype based on that model. Dreamcatcher. This is a cyanotype based on a project on the Sunset Strip in West Hollywood, California, where I wanted to create dream catchers, because as a child I had made this Native American craft, and at the time I couldn't sleep. I had insomnia, and in the middle of the night I went online and I was on YouTube and I saw this video. This is your brain when you reach deep sleep and dreaming, which I was not reaching. And I designed dreams to be caught in the dream catchers that would fit right in between the buildings. My engineers analyzed them, we tested them with built prototypes. They poured the floor slabs in concrete and we embedded the hardware inside them. And then the piece opened in the day, the color, it just alights between the two buildings. If you look down, you see, and they line up. There's a kind of oculus that I was going for. And then at night, it transforms with light. And it's a hotel. If you go to West Hollywood, this is the One Hotel, West Hollywood. And this is the view outside my window. That's the Dreamcatcher. And then when we finish, we test ourselves to continue to make our computer tools more and more accurate. This is a LiDAR scan, where it's a 3D point cloud. And here you can see it from a drone, a video camera. Another project you can see upstairs. This is this city. Anybody recognize what city this is? Anybody heard of the Big Dig? This is Boston before the Big Dig. That highway was nicknamed the world's largest parking lot. And it resulted, after the Big Dig, in a little teeny green park called the Greenway. And they asked, what would I like to do there? And I thought hard. And I thought, I want to sew the city back together over that wound. And they said, no, you don't get the whole thing. Just pick one spot. And I picked this spot, and I learned that it was all landfill, and that the earth I was walking on came by cutting down the Tremont Street. So I designed a piece with 3 voids to recall that transformation by humans of their earth. And then we were developing my software further so I could model the changing of colored bobbins and create patterns, and then create these 3-dimensional models so I could understand the relationship, the proportions, and how you would experience it when you walk through the city. And here you can see the model from my computer next to a photograph. It started at 3 a.m. when 7 cranes rolled in. We had to shut I-90, the exit there, and it was very exciting. One crate opened up into this 600-foot project, and we think that behavior in cities is hard to change, but underneath this is a part of the city that no one ever had lunch. It doesn't even have electricity there. suddenly people started gathering. They were bringing their lunch. They were walking there. A woman who lives in the neighborhood told me for the first time she felt safer. We pull it up with chains, and then we monitor the forces. And my engineers could actually see it on their iPhone all the time just to be sure, because nobody had ever done this. This is attached to 4 privately owned buildings. So it also is a social art to get everybody to play together. It's like what we learned in kindergarten, but for the public good, for the public sharing of it. And my friend Saul visited me, and she meditates, so she got me to lie down on the grass and look up. And when I opened my eyes again, I thought, it's like I can see the sky breathing for the first time. Like it's always happening, we just don't have a way of seeing it. And that building, there's a restaurant at the base, and I was talking to the waiter, and he said on the weekends he'll work past midnight and sometimes 1 a.m. at the Palm Steakhouse. And before he goes home with the sculpture overhead, he always stops and lies down in the grass and just watches the wind and the colors change before making his way home after work. I think that's the whole reason I make these pieces, is that moment of contemplation. This is the cyanotype for a piece about history in North Carolina. This is tracing the railroads and the textile mills, using textile as the method. And it's called Where We Met, because it's also how different communities came together. And now it's where the community comes together. This is a time lapse. We installed a winch system so that they get ice storms, so that way they can take it down or put it up. But you can see those shadow drawings beneath it. This is a piece closer to home. This is the new St. Pete Pier under construction when I was commissioned. And I started looking into its history, and I discovered that a US Supreme Court ruling came from this very site. It was the place there had been swim-ins, and it led to legislation that integrated pools and beaches all across America, but there wasn't a historic marker. So I made a big one called Bending Arc, because it's a very hopeful thing. This is a beautiful park, everyone is welcome, and it's made out of more than 180 miles of twine. Here you can see it from the sky. And actually, you can see those Adirondack chairs in a recent hurricane. The parks folks tethered them together directly under the piece, and that tether broke, and so they went flying into the piece. So it is right now undergoing some mending, but it will be back. We're in conversation right now about it. And at night, it changes color with light, and all kinds of things surprised everybody. This is a group who do drumming, and they started going every Friday evening. Community groups had their events under it. When people were doing protests on Friday evenings from City Hall, they chose the sculpture to tell stories underneath at the end of those protests. And when Putin invaded Ukraine, I flew down and I turned the whole piece yellow and blue to show solidarity. This is a piece called Current. That's the cyanotype, and here's the real thing. This is downtown Columbus, Ohio, over their major street. And here you can see it's attached to 4 privately owned buildings, different people all working together to give something to everyone in their city, like so civically minded. And it was donated to the Columbus Museum of Art, who own it and conserve it for the public. This is a piece I created in the waterfront of Vancouver, Canada. This is the largest piece, 750 feet. And my engineers, they went looking in history because they said, we think it's the largest pre-stressed rope structure in human history. And then they went and checked, and they looked at Inca bridges, and sure enough, it is. It was kind of scary because nobody had ever done it, but we did. And artistically, I also wanted to grow by inviting people to interact with it. And again, people could pick colors, and this time they could make gestures. So you picked the white color, I picked magenta, and suddenly our circles, the ripples intersect. So it's a physical space and a virtual space at the same time. Intimate work. I had been working in the public sphere. I had never made a piece in a private home. And then I was invited to do a work for a couple who live in Montecito, California, in their home. And here you can see my drawings and then the built piece. And actually, I was with them last week. This is in Montecito, Santa Barbara area. And that's the owner of the piece, just walking by on his way to breakfast. This is a private home in India, in Mumbai. Drawing, built piece. This is about, it's called Without Beginning, Middle, or End. They asked if I would do a piece about their religious beliefs. They're Hindu, and without beginning, middle, or end is the way that the deity is described. And so I've taken the rivers of the world, because for me, water, like it comes down as rain and it evaporates back up into the clouds, and it comes down as rain to form the rivers. And so you don't know where it began and where it ended, which seemed like a metaphor that worked, including their holy river, the Ganges. So those are those rivers. And that leads us into this space. This is a model for a larger piece. This is a 1/9 scale model, but I really think of it in its own right as an artwork. And this is the first time, thank you, Lacey, that it's been shown in this way as a bas-relief. And here, these are two of the cyanotypes made from that digital model. But the piece itself came because I was assigned or invited to make a commission for a new park just north of Dallas, Texas. And it turns out that's on the migration path of the monarch butterfly. And so this is my piece inspired by our interconnectedness with pollinators. It's called Butterfly Rest Stop. There you can see it in the new park. At night it transforms. And it's really my first piece where plant material is part of the art material, because I wanted it to also feed the butterflies. So more than 3,300 pollinator-supported plants are planted in the park under the net as part of the artwork. And here you can see how I create these. These are the newest tools where I can now really play with different colors and very quickly know that if I switch certain bobbins, I'll get a different pattern. This is a multi-layered piece, and that's the model that's upstairs that I showed you. This is Butterfly Rest Stop, but here's the full-size one. There are the cyanotypes. This is another environmental interconnected piece that is here. Part of the prototype for that is, this is about the history and the future of our Earth. Here's the digital model and the inspiration of data. I spent the last 3 years in residence at MIT, and it's their climate scientists who were working with me to translate that to that. And this is the new tool that they created for me at MIT to create the prototype you can see upstairs. And this is the search for equilibrium, where all the forces are even and equal. And what was so exciting when we put it into the space, and this is showing us the forces, and red is the highest force. And what was interesting is that the physical truth, that like that's the moment of now. The past is on the left, and the future's on the right. And is that we all know that right now is what will determine the future. And that there's this physical truth in the sculpture that the most charge is right now. It felt like it was revealing. And the title, Remembering the Future. Dance is also part of the exhibition upstairs. You can see video of, this is the first collaboration where I was invited by the Stuttgart Ballet in Germany. And my idea was to extend the human body, the head or the arms. And then I wanted to create a world for the dancers to be inside of, because I wanted to explore what it means to move in a world where the ground is no longer solid. And how many of us, just in reading the news recently, feel like things that we thought were just like the foundational things are no longer solid. That's what this piece is about. And it's about learning and navigating. And the title of the piece is Don't Be Afraid. Like, how do we move through a world where even the floor is shifting, and where the person to your right or your left, when they move, it changes the shape of the ground that you stand on. And I have the trailer, which I'll show you. And then you can see a longer piece upstairs, but I'll give you this. Oops, wait, I'm gonna let you watch it. Okay, come on. It's a 1 hour performance with no intermission. And the dancers, after the performance, when they come and stand on the ground, they say that suddenly the ground feels unfamiliar. You know, how many people have been on a boat? You get off the boat and you feel that way. I'm going to close with a piece. I've been working about interconnectedness of the planet and all these large systems of humans with the planet. And at the 20th wedding anniversary of my husband and myself, I decided to look inward and make a piece about our marriage, a check-in. I think about the vulnerability of letting myself be influenced by another. And so this is the cyanotype from that piece. There are two separate forms, and there's airspace. You can see the sky in between, and they touch at just one point. And this is that piece installed in Milan in the Piazza Senato, the Plaza of the Senate. There it is, looking up at the sky. And the thing is, you see that the colors jump across the void, but you don't really know which one's influencing which one. And they become sort of this one atmosphere, one entity, depending on where you see it. And this is a piece that Virginia Shearer and the team here asked me to sort of look at how that might fit. And it kind of happens to fit really well between this place and the cafe next door. And so I would be very excited if this one day might come. And we couldn't make it happen in time for this exhibition, but it does have the potential to come sometime in the future. And thank you. I'll meet you all upstairs. We're not going to take questions here. I'm just going to be up in the gallery. So if you want to walk up with me, I'll let Lacey close. And thank you, Lacey. Oh, yes. And the book signing is at the gift shop.
Yes, we will have Janet with us just for a short bit, signing some books if anyone is interested. We have some for sale in the shop. And
then I'll head right upstairs. So you can also ask me questions where I'm signing books.
Thank you all so much for coming. We hope to see you upstairs.
Thank you.